Hello, hello, everyone. Ted Simpson here, certified Bob Ross instructor, and we're going to go ahead and do a fun little painting again for you. What I like to do here is show you just about every time putting out our thin layer of liquid white. Need to cover that canvas, just a thin film. If you get a little too much on there, just give it a quick wipe, and whatever's left should be the right amount. We've got a 12 by 16 canvas set up here. Looks like I didn't frame it super great. We're not going to see too much of the top anyway. Just some simple sky, I believe. So it's a little cut off, but you know, that's what we got today. Little something extra special here. A little bit of liquid black. So I covered the bottom, say 3/4 with the liquid white, and then working from the bottom up just a little bit. You can see how I go back and pick up a little bit from the bottom there just to get all the excess off and just keep bringing it up until it meets the liquid white and just kind of going up and down, back and forth, create a little bit of gray in between the white and the black. There it is. And I took my 2-inch brush and just blurred that gray a little bit. Just, feather it until you're happy. I don't know where you're watching from, but I'm here in Michigan, and I think we finally cracked the end of summer. Temperatures dropped like 20 degrees, and so maybe we're finally getting into fall. Had an amazing sunset last night too. Just puttering around in the garage with my canvases. Just notice how pink everything was looking. I go out there and like the whole sky was pink and bits of purple. Gorgeous. After a day of rain, it really was nice to see the sun right at the end of the day. So in our scene here, just a little bit of the Indian yellow brushed out, switch right on over to bright red. And you can see how quickly that bright red mixes with that liquid white and turns very, very pink. And if you're looking for a pastel type scene, yeah, blend it, blend it, and blend it. If you want those bold colors to shine through, just don't hit it as much. Remember, we clean and soften. I should say we soften with a clean and dry brush. Getting my voiceovers a little loopy here. So just blend and soften as much or as little as you like. It is good to knock the excess paint off the brush on occasion. Keeps her from mixing too much. Now, a little bit of that straight bright red on the fan brush. Look at how we can zing in a few little stringy clouds. If you've caught my last couple of videos, you know I've been watching a lot of Nick Hankins on the Joy of Painting, and he certainly likes putting in at least a few of the episodes here, these little angled flat stringy clouds. I think they look really cool. And multiple colors. You could do purples in here and whites to go along with the red. And just the lightest, briefest touch with the blender brush softens those clouds and just kind of pushes them into the scene. But that's about all they need. So I'm coming up with just a little bit. I know it's cut off, a little bit of the blue just at the very top, filling in some of the excess white spots there. And if you want to make up a little purpley color, zing those in. That's just a little bit of phthalo blue and bright red. You could make it with alizarin crimson and Prussian blues and, whatever combination. So, as I said, if you felt like it, you could have left it as is. Here I am just zinging on a little bit of highlights on the bright red with a titanium white. It's a really firm color. Once it's on there, it'll stay and it can handle a little light brushing to blend and soften it. Since it's so firm, it shouldn't blend away unless you really make it happen. So a little dirty finger painting in today. Boy, I'll wipe my hands before I do this here. So I just took a little titanium white on my finger, rubbed it in, the lightest touch, and look at that nice glow in the sky. Pull the brush down, so you create a couple of little zinger light rays coming out. And it always leaves a little fiddle there in the bright spot. You just have to brush it sideways and just blur it out again. So a little bit of that bright red and phthalo blue just mixed onto the fan brush. Now in this case here, I'd added no white to my purpley color. You could make it a little more pastel if you wanted to, or make it just nice and bold using that pure color. Now we'll take our 1-inch brush and with a medium pressure, push and slide it out eventually. And it just helps that you have your brush nice and clean and dry so it doesn't really move or pick up too much paint. Well, it's up to you. The great thing about this is there's so many factors that can change the look and you just have to go with it. How much paint you put on, how much you pull it out with the fan brush, how much you do it with the 1-inch brush. how firm you push and how many times. What I try to do here is following Bob's philosophy of just move on, you know. And if you notice here, sometimes the faster you go, the better effect you get. And just let it blur and disappear into the white. So looks like we're gonna just darken the top a little bit, give it a little more distinctness. And blur it out a little more. So how many mountains are we putting in today? Your guess is as good as mine. It's been a few days since I painted this one. Can't quite remember. Looks like we are doing another one. A little bit more paint in the brush, a little firmer hand getting it off, and trying to figure out an interesting shape here. And just as Bob always told us here, putting light against dark, dark against light, this mountain here overlaps a little bit of the previous step. And you can see here it overlaps the sky, much, much darker, and also overlaps the base of the previous mountain where it's nice and light and misty. So when all else fails, overlap that previous step and make sure that it contrasts. There it is. Another contrast here is the different angle that this mountain is basically flowing in. The first mountain started on the right and blended to the left, and we do the opposite here. And that difference of angles adds a little more interest to your painting. It doesn't look as flat or dull. There's some movement happening here, a little bit of a flow, and we're working our way down, right on down to the little gray area separating our liquid white and liquid black. I guess we could call that bit a little bit of liquid gray. So we've got our mountains on here, and we're going to be putting in a little bit of a flutter flicker in Nick's scene here, holding that brush a little bit sideways and really just letting it flick and flutter. There's no other good way to describe it. If you watched the classic Bob episode, Emerald Waters, where he starts with a black canvas covered with sap green, he goes in there with just a little bit of cadmium yellow and flutters and flicks and flippy doos that fan brush. Same concept here, where we can make distant bushes. I believe there was another episode called Hazy Day where Bob did this flutter move with some titanium white with yellow in it, I do believe. I always remember that episode as it was one of my bigger classes that I taught for the first time. and it's an acquired skill. You got to kind of let go. And I always think of it as kind of like holding it like a pair of chopsticks. You got your middle finger just kind of flicking that fan brush up and down. Then again, I'm not very good at chopsticks. So a little bit of green and yellow, maybe a touch of white to lighten it up. And we can create an illusion here of a little bit of a meadow, kind of bringing ourselves into the mid ground here. Not a great deal of detail needed, so a little bit of various colors. Let them kind of mix and fall off the brush. You can play around with it and put a little bit of lighter area right under the brightest part of the sky. And you can see it has a little bit of a faded green over outside of the brightest area. And now with a darker color, as we move forward, things get darker. So here comes that fluttery chopstick flip, a little bit of a push. Got to bend those bristles, and that paint will come off. If you hadn't noticed or made the connection yet, we use this same move also, like making splashes in the seascapes, creating all that churn and stuff, or when we're making waterfalls and flicking up. It's the brush doing the work. We just kind of push it around and let the paint come off. Working my way down a little bit now into the gray, liquid gray. And coming back with my highlight color, a little bit thinner so it sticks without mixing in. We flutter and flick some highlights onto this second row of foliage. All right. Boy, here I go. Just overworking it, huh? You know, got a nice new color here. Finally, I'm showing you how I'm mixing some of these colors. A little bit of that color really worked into the brush. Pull it down and then push up. A little tapping, pushing up, and we can create a little bit closer looking grass. And just start tappa tappa tappa, working our way into a little closer into the black, which helps dull the color. And there we go, starting a new brush load of color. Creates that bright, bright color again, and then keep working, working, working. Let it just get duller and duller. You can do quite a lot with just one brush full. I do my best not to go backwards, but sometimes you gotta sneak a little bit, final bit back in the first spot. Here we go. Angles again, very important. We can make this very flat, like putting green, that flat, or you give it a little bit of an angle, and the land just flows. Here we go. Now that we're getting into the black and I have very little paint left on my brush, I just keep tapping, and look how it just fades. I do like that. Keep it going. I'm taking my time, aren't I? Little bit at a time, and just keep moving. Change up the color now and again. You could give this a fall feel. Heck, once in a while, Bob would even use this technique to put snow in. One of that tricky bits is letting the dark remain, you know? Too often, I used to just fill everything up. Every single thing needs to be highlighted. Now it's how little highlighting can I get away with? But sometimes I get caught up in it too, and just keep bashing and bashing and bashing it, making that grass a little bit flatter. The more you go over it, the softer it will get. And it can make sense that back in the rightmost top area there, where it's a little softer because it's a little further away and a little more textured as we get down towards the bottom or closer in the scene. And if you really want to make a couple of extra zingers, a little bit of color on the fan brush. and you can really, you know, add little final little bits. Even push up, give it even more texture. You'd think this one could be done. It certainly could if we wanted it to be, but I think we got to add some new stuff. Boy, this would be a fast video, huh? Almost Bob speed. But no, there's always going to be something more. Got to spice it up a little bit. So, how do we spice it up? Tree? Nah. Birch tree? No. Cabin time. Let's drop this in, and we'll try to do it a little faster. I didn't break it down like I usually do. If you really want to see a cabin broken down into its little component parts, you can watch one of the other videos here. But this one, I pull inward and create an eave, and then make our roof line here. Push. See, there we go. A nice spread in a sideways angle, and just make it nice and dark. And just laying it on there in as few strokes as you can get away with. That's the trick. Just needs to be dark and move right along. Leave that little bit of roof overhang. Sometimes I do the little Bob cheat. I use the side of a knife and really create a vertical line. As long as we got the dark blocked in, the rest will fend for itself. And here I am doing a little bit of fiddling, just cleaning up the edges a little bit. We'll mix up our highlight shade here. White, little bit of dark sienna and white. And just the lightest possible touch. Gives it that old board effect. And then with a clean knife, I go right on over it and decide, no, sir, I don't like it. You can decide that. You can change it, redo it anytime you want. Just put the dark back on, and you got yourself a nice little cabin blocked in again. So let's make little more log cabin look. So a very small roll on the knife and just touch and move. Tut, 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 tut. Not too worried about the bottom, just trying to get it low enough right down to the roof line. And then we're gonna take our knife and just cut off the bottom and make the logs go in the opposite direction. So as long as you have some vertical lines going down towards the base of the where the edge of the cabin is, you can see I'm kind of lining it up. And then with a little bit of the Van Dyke brown, we cut it off. There it is. Pretty slick. And now we did make some little vertical logs. Doot, 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 doot. Touch, 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 touch. And if at first you don't succeed, I'm giving you a little bit of a extra attempt. And just like golf, it's just a mulligan. You can mulligan yourself at any point. For the other side, it's simply tapping at a slightly different angle. That gives you that three-dimensional effect. Look at that. We got ourselves a interesting little box cabin. And with a little rat-a-tat-tat move, let's put our little shingle action there. Little bright liquid white. And we can line the outer edge of the cabin, like on the eave and such. I think we also got to make a door. Right now, it looks like there's nothing there. There we go. Line that little roof up. Well, anyone watching this video, I'm not sure if you've made it this far, but if you have, here we are in the first week, almost second week of October, October 8th. And next week, I'll be going to TwitchCon San Diego. 10 years of TwitchCon. And I do believe it's 10 years of Bob Ross on Twitch. So we got ourselves a fun little cabin. We'll be doing a bunch of classes out there. Um, Big 100-person class and a bunch of smaller classes for the attendees. So for those that are headed out to TwitchCon, look for us. Come say hi to me. I'll be out there with a few certified instructor friends. It's going to be great. So, how much else we got in this little scene here? Of course, I made a couple little cabin windows and cut around them with a little touch of the liquid white. One of my most nerve-wracking moves is trying to cut in a little highlight on the door. You can see, oh, sometimes I got a mulligan that too. Do our cabinectomy. Chop off the bottom there. And of course, the final bit on the cabin is putting a little bit of the land back in this case, a little bit of grass. Of course, we could do a path or any number of things there, but the idea is the grass is overlapping the cabin a little bit. Here I am adding a little more and letting it fade off into shadow. And boy, I'm really going at it. I should have left it. Now that I think about it, I don't know. Did I ruin it? Am I making it better? I'm being a little tentative about it because I don't want to kill all the dark. I think that's about it. Putting in a couple of final little sticks and twigs if you like, and then we'll call this one complete.